NHS Trust. Today is Thursday the 10th of November and I'm delighted to welcome you to this meeting of the board in public, and my greeting goes to members of the board, our guests, and indeed anyone that's watching us on YouTube. You'll know that we normally, or I normally try to start our board meetings with a reference to our golden pyramid, our pyramid which expresses our values, our visions, our objectives, and so on. One of the things that isn't mentioned specifically there, explicitly, is the behaviour or a culture of respect. It's implied in a lot of the things we talk about, but it actually isn't listed currently explicitly. When I talk about respect, I'm not just talking about civility, although that's obviously a really important part of this, but I'm actually talking about the respect we show to an individual where we see who they are. That we see who they are, we accept them, we support them, and we embrace them and their identity. That's relevant today because actually as we start our meeting, we're going to hear from two stories or two instances which absolutely speak to that quality or that thing that we aim to live by. A little bit later on, we're going to hear a patient story, and of course with patients this is critical, because if we actually see who they are, we are able to give them person-centred, individualised care and treatment and the way that we support them. But it's actually equally important for our staff, and we're going to be hearing in just a moment from Dr. Luke Simmons, who is our chair of our LGBTQ plus staff network. Again, for our staff it's just as important, because if they can bring their authentic selves to work, they're going to be more effective, they're going to be more motivated, they're going to feel more valued. So that's something that we also aspire to very much. On that note, I'm going to hand over to Tina to introduce Luke. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. And just to remind the board, this is a series of all the staff network chairs attending boards. We had Donna Scarrett early in the year to provide her personal lived experience story, but an update on that network. We've got Dr. Luke Simmons today on the LGBTQ+, where we've got to. We're also scheduled in the chair for the Black, Asian and Minority Ethnic Network, and we've got a new faith network which we'll be hearing from in the new year as well. So we have circulated the slides, and they're available to the public as well. And I'm going to hand over to Luke just to talk us through how the network's doing, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina, and thank you, Chair, for that wonderful start. I think for me it's so fantastic to hear that focus on health inequalities, on our staff wellbeing, and there's seems to be a real shift coming on board with the trust, so that's fantastic to hear. Hopefully, can you see those slides? Wonderful. So, as I've been introduced, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Luke, my pronouns are he and him. I'm the staff network chair of the LGBTQ+ network. I'm an intensive care doctor in the trust as well. I've been here for coming up to 8 years now. So thank you for giving me the opportunity today to come and talk to you, let you know what the staff network is all about and the support we need. I would like to just spend 10 minutes giving you a bit of a snapshot about why the staff network is important, what we've achieved so far in the coming up to 12 months that I've been chair of the network, start to think about some of the barriers and the risks going forward for the network, and then some requests from the board as well. Happy to answer any questions as we go along if you put hands up, or I can ask questions at the end. Just to put into context why the staff network is so important, I know we're in very troubling times for our LGBTQ+ colleagues, particularly our trans and non-binary friends. We're in a time where hate crimes are rising exponentially towards our LGBT friends, particularly our trans friends. We're in a media storm where people's gender and ability to identify is being debated on a daily basis. We're going backwards in time, and in some places in the world we're going back to the days of Section 28, where teachers aren't allowed to provide information to school children about being LGBT, and we have a government who's going back on their promises to protect people from cruel conversion therapy. So we are in a world at the moment where our colleagues and our patients are going to be facing great difficulties. When we bring that slightly closer to home, there's been some research into attitudes towards healthcare and inequalities, and Stonewall did some research a few years ago looking at how our staff were treated within the workplace, and nearly a quarter of patient-facing staff heard homophobic or biphobic remarks. And the environment that we create is leading to our patients not feeling like they can come to hospital. And 1 in 7 LGBT people avoid healthcare altogether for fear of discrimination. So we're not creating an environment where our staff feel safe and comfortable to come to work, or an environment where our patients feel comfortable to present. And I think that's the importance of the network there in a nutshell. Thinking about the things we've done over the last 12 months, for those of you who are aware of the Health Watch report, these are themes with the recommendations from the Health Watch report that was given to us back in 2020. But one of my focuses when I started was to increase awareness of the network and the issues that the LGBT community face. We've had some great opportunities with Matthew giving us his newsletter, his weekly newsletter. We've had some screensavers, introducing LGBT History Month, and we've also got a new staff intranet site with some educational resources on, a bit about us, some support, and some resources that they can guide patients to when they're in trouble. And we've had some brilliant support from the comms team. I know Richard's here today, so thank you very much to the comms team for all their help with that. Part of the awareness has been our project working towards the NHS Rainbow Badge, which I'll talk about in a moment. And we've also provided our network with some more training and education, which I think is going to be key to our development and developing culturally competent staff as we go along over the next few years. One of the requests from patients was to increase visibility within the services. Our patients wanted to know that we were an environment that was thinking about them and supportive of them. So we've recently created, and we're about to release, some new posters that we can have in clinical areas and in staff areas to help our patients and staff know that we are thinking about them and we are a trust that values that diversity. We've also been doing some work, Rich Luckman in OD has been working hard on inclusive recruitment, and it's fantastic to see that we are trying to diversify our workforce, particularly at a senior level, because we know that if people can't see themselves reflected at a senior level, there's that concern about lack of visibility and lack of acceptance. So I think that's a hugely important project that's going on. We can see what a difference it makes when you have a project that is focused towards people who aren't in the majority, and we can see what a difference the #CallMe project has made to so many of our LGBT patients. I think there's room to develop that, and one of the things, as I said, I'll talk about in a second, that's come out of the Rainbow Badge project is patients want to be able to display their pronouns. And I think that's also reflected within our staff as well. And whether there's that ability to develop the hashtag #CallMe for patients to then be able to display their pronouns as well, I think is a really important thing to do. We need to start thinking about how we collect data from our patients and staff about their sexual orientation and gender identity so that we know who we're delivering care to. And that may be a bit small, but this is sort of the work that I've been involved with this week. This is our new PAS system on the right, which has, as you can see, a huge list of titles that are available to people to choose, yet there's no gender neutral title. So our trans and non-binary patients will have to pick a binary Mr. or Mrs. when they come in to present. And that's going to create a huge barrier from that very first thing as soon as they step through the door. But one thing we need to do is make sure that we're creating a safe enough environment for them to be able to do that. And I think that's what we see when we look at our ESR data. We've got a tiny proportion of our staff, much less than we'd expect, that are identifying as LGBT. But until we make that safe and inclusive environment for them to be able to bring their whole selves to work, I don't think there's any point in going back and asking them to update their ESR data, because they just simply won't. We need to create that environment that they feel safe to bring their whole selves to work and say who they really are. We've been doing some work on inclusive language, and hopefully we've got a new inclusive language policy, as well as some guidelines that are going to come out shortly. I think that was brought to the board last month. Tina did that, and it was fantastic to see in the family leave policy how inclusive, and the inclusive language that was included in that. So we're starting to see some real developments there, and that's fantastic. We're doing some work on a new trans policy as well to update that and make sure that we're being as inclusive as we can there. We've also created a new section of the Trust website so that our LGBT patients can go on and see and get some comfort again that we are thinking about them. We know that there are differences when they come to hospital, and hopefully give some reassurances for them that we will be using their name, we will be using their correct pronouns, how to escalate if they feel that they've been discriminated against, and some resources for them. That was an ask from the Health Watch report, that we collected some resources for people so that they had a place to go to. Of course, I could do any of this without the fantastic network behind us. This is a photo from the recent Pride event in Worcester, which was a fantastic opportunity for us to get together as a network and show the community what we're doing. And there was some great engagement from the community, and I think it was just a brilliant opportunity actually for the network to get together for the first time, meet each other off camera, and I think that's going to give us some real strength moving forward. I wanted to talk briefly about the NHS Rainbow Badge Assessment, but I think this is probably one mostly to save for another day, because I think we need a lot more time than I've got here. I'm conscious of time already. So the NHS Rainbow Badge Assessment we've been doing since January, and for those of you who don't know, was looking at 5 parts of the trust. They reviewed our policies, we carried out a staff survey, a patient survey, we looked at the services we provide, and we looked at the workforce. Some good points were our engagement with the trust, and again, that's thanks to our comms team. We had the highest responses from this pilot so far that any trust had had, which means we've got some really rich data. The data that was collected, I'm not surprised at, and we've been awarded, you were awarded either an initial stage, bronze, silver or gold award, depending on the work we've done. We were awarded an initial stage, but what is good to see is that a lot of the recommendations that have come out are things we've started to tackle over the last 6 months. So we are already making progress. The general themes were a need for education and patients needing to be asked their sexual orientation, their gender identity, and what pronouns they needed to use. What was very sad to have come out of the NHS Rainbow Badge assessment was that in the box that was labelled, what can we do to help support our LGBT colleagues and patients, in our staff survey, there were over a dozen grossly homophobic and transphobic comments written in those boxes. And it's a very difficult read for some of our network to think that is the culture, and these are the clinicians and colleagues that they're working with. And I think for me that highlights the work that there is to be done here. We need a real culture shift. Thinking about our barriers and our risks, I think a lack of awareness and understanding is key here, and the need for education. I think equality and diversity runs far wider than people appreciate. And I think when I think about the things I was involved with last week, thinking about our new digital project, those of you that were there yesterday, I gave the example of our new EPR. A child isn't allowed to have same-sex parents. They're only allowed a mum and a dad as their next of kin. If we think about our new theatre build, thinking about the provision of inclusive facilities, and it's that lack of awareness and understanding that I think is our huge barrier to progress. Non-engagement as well. I think I've seen equality impact assessments done and then been ignored. And I think lack of resources and protected network time. I think I appreciate we're very stretched as a trust at the moment, but we still have a lot of network colleagues that are struggling to get their time off to come to a network. And I think building on that awareness and understanding, I do worry, and I know it is a worry for our network, really thinking, is EDI a priority for this trust? And I know we do have best people in our strategic objectives, but I do wonder how much we want to change and how quickly we want to change. Which brings me to what do we need from the board? And for me, what I really feel that we need is some strategic leadership for EDI. I think having someone who has an oversight of those ideas that I was just talking about, thinking about how it rolls into digital, into theatre builds, things like that, having that person who has an overview of some strategic leadership for all of our networks and patients and colleagues with protected characteristics, I really think is something that the board and the trust need to think about moving forward if we are really committed to making meaningful change. Having the board lead by example, I think is really important, and I think without senior leaders helping to make that change, I think people on the floor will find it much harder to follow. And it's wonderful to hear Anita using her pronouns when she introduced herself at the start. Things like that are really helping to make this environment and this trust more inclusive. I think key to the Rainbow Badge assessment is going to be education and training for our staff. And for me, I've got a sort of two-pronged approach to this, is that I think we need to refresh our mandatory training and our basic level awareness for all of our staff. I think the mandatory training that we put out at the moment isn't fit for purpose. And I think we need to think about how we train and educate our staff. And I think there's a huge opportunity with the Rainbow Badge to do some allyship workshops with our colleagues as well. We're going to need some resources, some backing to complete the Rainbow Badge action plan that's been given. And as I said, some protected time for our networks. I'm very conscious that I've definitely overrun my 10 minutes, so I will stop there. I'm very sorry, and answer any questions or suggestions that people might have.
Thank you, Luke, and not at all. I think that was a very good summary. Opening it up for questions or comments. Don't see any hands raised at the moment. Simon.
Thanks, Anita, and thanks, Luke. A couple of questions from me. One is on what does sort of best practice look like elsewhere? I know you've got a list of things you'd like the board to do, but are there other trusts around the country who are sort of manifestly perhaps better in this sphere of working with colleagues and supporting colleagues? And this one, I don't know how this might land. In our integrated performance report, we have a workforce composition slide, which records the number of colleagues who are from a BAME background. I just wonder whether that's something we should explore for the LGBTQ staff, and perhaps for the staff with disabilities as well. It may not be as straightforward, because I am conscious that some staff would not want to be or find it difficult to come to work as themselves for fear of discrimination and from personal experience, but I just wonder whether that might be a helpful thing to explore in due course, so that everybody can publicly see how many of our staff who do identify as LGBTQ.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. So, answering the first part of the question is the Rainbow Badge Assessment has set out essentially a gold standard framework for us to work towards. They've given us a very detailed action plan, and they're the things that we can work towards that they've seen done well elsewhere. They've given us some examples of what's been done elsewhere. So I think those are the things that we need to work towards and use that assessment plan to advance ourselves. Secondly, I think that data information capture is really important to know who our colleagues are. But your point, and as I said earlier, the problem is we need to have an environment that people feel safe to be able to divulge that information. And I think at the moment, I suspect that we are not an environment that people are going to feel comfortable going back and changing their ASR to say who they are. Well, if you take, for example, we have more patient staff identifying that they're LGBTQ+ on the Rainbow Badge survey than on our ASR. So we know that we're not capturing that, but it's how we change that.
Thank you. Simon Adams.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, inviting me to the board meeting, but also giving me the opportunity to ask a question. And I think first I'll start by thanking the board and particularly Luke for the reception you gave to our report. Because we've had a really positive response, and Luke's been really cooperative in giving up some of his time to come to our board meeting to explain what you've been doing for patients. And we will at some time in the future obviously go back to those patients once you've had an opportunity. I think once you've sort of progressed the Rainbow Badge would be, I'm seeing Luke's nodding, once you've got that, sort of got somewhere with the badge and got a trajectory going, then's the time to go back to the patients. It's far too early to go to patients at the moment. The question I wanted to ask though, and I sort of followed this debate about property development within the trust, is whilst you're required to carry out an equality impact assessment on decisions you make that affect external issues, are you as a trust carrying out an equality impact assessment on issues that are essentially internal? So therefore, if you were designing a building, have you carried out an equality impact assessment before you made a decision about how you would, for example, locate the toilets or the showers, or how you'd actually manage restroom areas? So I just want to sort of float that over to you as, do you do it? And if you don't, is it an idea you might want to consider? Because whilst you would want to say as an organisation, everybody's on top of this EDI stuff, we know that they're not, and it's not at the forefront of their mind, and hence I guess Luke asking for some strategic leadership to actually help drive that.
Simon, thank you. I don't know if there's anybody. Tina, yeah, I don't know if you'll want to come in and respond on that point.
Yes, so if we use the theatre example, we did have a meeting to develop the equality impact assessment, so we do complete those. I think there's been some miscommunication around the outcome of that quality impact assessment. There, obviously, pace of the development, we will have male and female changing rooms there, but there will also be a gender neutral changing room, which I don't think was communicated back to me and Luke and others. So we have that's the update that I've received this morning on that. But so I think that's where we've to Luke's comment around quality impact assessments not being ignored. I don't think that's the case here. I think it's been a miscommunication.
Thank you for that.
Can I just say, Chair, just for clarification, I hadn't heard that Luke had said that EDIs were being ignored. I was actually asking a question about whether the assessments were the EIA assessments were actually being made on internal decisions. Because my experience, I have to say, I see the NHS coming. Ironically, the NHS coming to this issue, some, 20 years after other organisations tackled it head on. But it's my experience that EIAs are carried out on external issues, but not always carried out on internal issues.
It's a good question, Simon, and as I say, I think let's take it back. No, thank you for that.
I didn't want you to think that Luke had been suggesting to anybody, certainly in my presence, that EIAs have not been sort of properly dealt with or communicated.
No, not at all. Point taken. Right, Julie.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate and thank Luke and the team for the leadership and bringing this, because they've done a cracking job on it. But I want to say as well that in the past 10 years this country's really gone backwards. And I can tell you that there are people in the Trust who are going to retire never having told anybody, never having come out, because I've spoken to them. And there are people who are still very, very frightened. And as Luke said, those people putting those comments down on the survey, what if they all work in one department and there's one person working in there? And, it's not the only thing we've got to get right, because I think in the Trust as well there's a fair degree of misogyny goes on as well. But there certainly is a degree of homophobia. People don't feel safe anymore. The world has gone backwards. People feel empowered to be far more any ist you want to name at the moment. Racist, homophobic, the whole lot. And I think as an organisation we need to make it very clear. So if anybody does make any comments that in any way is discriminatory, we need to deal with that hard. There are other places that have done it are more advanced in this, and we can learn from them. But actually, when you've got people with those hardened attitudes, then it's going to be very difficult to do it. So we do have to set that from the top. But I think Luke's got a great group of people there that are working really hard, and we need to give them all the support we can.
Yeah, absolutely, Julie, and I completely agree with that. And I think, as you say, we seem to have empowered an awful lot of ists that come out of the woodwork now. And Luke did share with me the report, and I've seen those comments. They were genuinely shocking, genuinely of deep concern. Completely agree with you. Waqar.
Thank you, Chair. This question to Tina. We've adopted the 7-point diversity plan. I just wonder if there's any work that's been done, any analysis based on different groups of what the impact of the 7-point diversity plan will be on each of the groups across the Trust.
Not at this stage, Waqar, so that's a good question, a good challenge. So I'll take that back and we will do that analysis. Obviously, what we did when we developed the 7-point plan was to look at all of our current data and the workforce race equality standards, workforce disability standards, and the Rainbow Badge feedback to come up with the 7 priorities. But I don't think we've actually, sort of thought through some of those actions on their impacts. We'll undertake that work, and I'll report back through to the People and Culture Committee on that. Thank you. I just wanted to come back on Simon's challenge, Simon Chippendale's challenge, Simon Adams' challenge on the quality impact assessments. We do undertake quality impact assessments on our policies, so that's part of our template around particularly anything to do with our people. We also have part of the business planning, business case templates as well, the equality and quality impact assessment template to support those. So that is our standard business. Thank you.
Thank you, Waqar and Tina. Simon, last question.
Thanks. It was just a reflection on something that Julie had said, and we have discussed this before in the context of the behavioural charter, and it actually having some teeth and some visibility and some results as a result of it. So I think it's helpful that Julie raised that issue here now, obviously in the context of LGBTQ and I, but we do need to make sure that colleagues know that that behavioural charter is not just a piece of paper or on a screen. If something happens, something can be done about that. Easier said than done, I know, but as Julie said, it has been done elsewhere better perhaps than we're learning, but we must make sure that the behavioural charter does make a difference. It's part of our response.
Yeah, completely agree, Simon. I mean, in terms of those particular comments, I think they were anonymous in the survey, so unfortunately we don't know who they were, the individuals, but they were shocking. I'm just going to bring this to a close. So first of all, thank you, Luke, so much for coming, and thank you for your leadership. I've certainly really enjoyed engaging with you and the network over the last year or so. I think there's some real progress here, and I think you're asking all the right questions, you're making all the right challenges, and I think one of the things that I would like us to consider, and I guess this is Tina and Matthew predominantly, your question, your suggestion for having a specific lead that could lead on EDI across, for all the protected characteristics, because of course intersectionality is absolutely going to be part of this too. Is that something that we feel would help move us forward faster? But thank you very much, and thank you for taking the time to come and talk to us today. This has been really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Luke. Bye-bye. Moving on then, as I said, on this sort of issue of respect, and now where it comes to patients, I'm going to hand over to Paula to tell us about our patient story. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. So I'm really pleased to welcome Emma Mackey, who is the Learning Disability Liaison Nurse at the Health and Care Trust. And obviously in the spirit of collaboration, this patient story involves two parts. One that is not positive, and the second part that is positive, and the lessons that learned to enable us to make the second journey of this patient into our trust in a positive light. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Emma, and she will tell the story on behalf of the patient and the family. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Emma, as was just said. I'm the acute liaison nurse. I've been in post since February, and my pronouns are she and her. So I was contacted by one of our learning disability community nurses, who informed me that a gentleman with Down syndrome was due to come into hospital for a procedure, and that as a consequence of a previous admission, which was during COVID, he was extremely anxious, as was his father. That experience hadn't been positive. He'd come into hospital via A&E and ended up on a ward. And obviously there were no issues in terms of his actual treatment, but at the time, those that were familiar with him weren't able to visit. And as a consequence of that, this gentleman had lost lots of weight. His personality, his father described him as his personality changing. He no longer engaged with people, and he was just very withdrawn following that visit. So when I was contacted by the community nurse, I then contacted Alan's father, and I offered whether they would like to have a walkthrough, so they would come to the Alex with me, and we would go and see the ward that he would be admitted to. We would talk to members of staff, but again he declined because he said he felt that his son was so anxious that would just kind of exacerbate his anxiety. So we made the decision that I would meet him and his dad on the morning of the procedure. I met them at the Alex at 7:30 in the morning. We went up to the day surgery unit. When I met them both, he was very withdrawn, but I introduced myself and we went straight into the ward. The ward staff were amazing. They got a side room ready for him. So in that side room there was obviously me, his father, and obviously the patient himself. His dad handed over his hospital passport to the nurse that was looking after him, which was full of information and really gave a fantastic picture of this gentleman. We were informed that he would be first on the list. The surgeon came and met with him and again explained everything that was going to be happening. We then had the anaesthetist who arrived. The anaesthetist was able to sign, so she signed some simple kind of sign language to him, and you could see his anxiety levels reducing the whole time, because he was in this lovely side room with people that he was familiar with, and everybody that came in engaged with him. And really paid attention to the information that his dad was telling them. So one of the questions the anaesthetist had asked was, did he have any problems with his neck? Because obviously sometimes people with Down syndrome have issues with their neck. And his dad said, oh no, because he's had lots of tests, because when he was an Olympic diver, and we all stopped and said, sorry, can you just take us back a bit? He'd actually swum and dived for Special Olympics. So that was incredible. It just it really brought to life this gentleman in front of us. Then the anaesthetist said, would I or his dad like to go down to the anaesthetic room with him? Dad declined. But I said I would be happy to go, so that he had somebody familiar with him when he went off to sleep. And then again, following the procedure, I was invited down to the recovery room before they woke him up. So again, when he came round, there was somebody familiar with him. And the whole procedure was a success. And it was just a really positive experience for Alan and for his dad. And both his dad and Alan said that they wouldn't feel as anxious as they felt previously, that it had been such a positive experience. And when I discussed telling this story at your board, his father said, I want lessons to be learned, but I want others to know the really positive experience that people can have when they come into hospital. So that's why I'm here delivering the story. So that's a bit of a whirlwind, isn't it? I've taken shorter time than I was allocated, and yeah.
Emma, thank you so much, and just while I'm waiting for any hands, I'll just say, thank you of course to everyone involved, but also to you. It sounds like you personally went above and beyond and really supported Alan on that second occasion, and it's lovely to think that as an organisation and working together, we actually were able to make that experience so much better for him. Paula, you wanted to come in.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Emma, and you did it so eloquently, and I think you've done Alan and his father proud, telling that story the way you have, so thank you very much. I think just going back to the not so positive, just so that I can reiterate, this was in the height of the pandemic, as we said, and I wasn't here at the time, but we did have compassionate visiting, and I think at the time the issues were with Alan where we didn't get his father to come in, and that isolated Alan, and even to the point of where we still had compassionate visiting just a few months ago in some of the wards, with I think whether there's a fear of bringing other people into the ward because of the COVID pandemic, and whether there was issues there. But I have had to address that on an individual ward basis of saying, no, we do offer compassionate visiting and we should be open. Obviously, we've now gone back to open visiting, and that has hopefully helped people. So I didn't want to miss the fact that it really did have an impact on Alan and his father when we didn't offer that compassionate visiting, and that still needs to be addressed in the light of anything else. If we have a norovirus outbreak and we've got wards shut down, then there's an issue that I still need to make sure that we're offering that open visiting to those relatives, because visiting is an important, integral part of somebody's recovery. But Emma, once again, thank you for absolutely going above and beyond. And I know that Alan and his father were really pleased with you. And I think what we need to do from the lessons learned, and we know we've got extra training in, we know we've got the Oliver McGowan training, it's mandatory now, so it's about making sure that we get people to do the training. But I also need to know that if Alan has to come back in again, that we have the same processes in place, not just for him, but anybody else who needs extra support. So if you have any issues at all, please contact me directly. Thank you.
Can I just say thank you for thanking me, but it's what I'm here to do, and it's a real privilege doing the job I do. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Emma, and well said, Paula. And as you say, it sounds like on his first visit he ought to have been able to have his father in. So there is absolutely some lessons learned there about, as and when the situation arises, exactly as you say, where we have to restrict visiting again, how are we going to make sure that all wards understand what the rules are and when and how they should be applied? So there's certainly some learning there. Any other questions or comments for Emma or Paula in this story? I don't see any other hands. Emma, thank you so much for coming, and Paula for bringing this one. It's a nice story because it's both got the sort of the ugly and the good there. It explains how things can go wrong, but also how the second time round we work together across trust to try and really make that experience so much better for him, and hopefully his confidence will have returned for the future. And as I say, it's about doing that not just for Alan, but it's for anybody else who's in a similar situation. So thank you again very much.
Thank you.
For taking time.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Lovely. A lovely story, and thank you, Paula, for bringing that to us today. It's good when we can have evidence of learning as an organisation, and that's what that was. Brilliant. Okay, thank you. I'm going to move then on to the formal sort of stuff of the meeting. So first of all, any other business? Anything anyone wants to raise? I don't see any hands, so I'll say no. I'll take that as no. I don't think we have any in advance. Declarations of interest, obviously our standard ones are on the website. Again, does anyone have anything to declare specifically to do with the agenda for today? Again, I don't see any hands. Thank you very much. Moving on then to the minutes of the last meeting on the 13th of October. They're in your pack. Any questions or comments? Are we happy to take these as a fair record? No, Neil.
Thank you, Chair. Just trying to find the page on which my note is 26, page 26, in respect to the finance report. I just think it reads as though we've got a significant overspend in respect to our financial position. What I actually reported were 200,000 adverse to plan. So if I could just provide a form of words just to change that in line with the finance report, Chair, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. And can I also spot it on page 24 in the operation performance report. In the first bullet, there's a comment about 7,600 patients reaching 78 weeks. I'm sure that's not correct. So I wonder if I could ask Paul or the team to just correct that number, because I can't believe that's the right number. I'm guessing it's the typo. But if someone could look into that, that would be great too.
Anita,
oh, Paul.
If I could just come on that, what that figure is the number of patients who could potentially reach 78 weeks at the end of March if we did nothing. So it's not a number that have reached, it's what the potential is if we haven't taken action to achieve that.
Okay.
And I can confirm that figure now stands at 6,200.
Okay, perfect. So I think it's the wording of it, because it seems to say that at the end of September there were 7,600 patients. So if we can just tighten that up so that it's a true record, that'd be brilliant. Justine, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, just one slight amendment on top of page 27. The fifth bullet point down talks about 6 international midwives starting in the next few months. It will be at the end of the next 12 months.
Again, thank you for that. Any other amendments? No? Okay. So, subject to those things that we just need to correct, are we happy to treat that in essence as a fair record? Thank you very much. Then, moving on, action log. Rebecca.
Thank you, Chair. There's one kind of open action with an update during December, and that'll be tied up with the ongoing review of the board development plan. The other items are closed as indicated. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions regarding the action log? No? Okay, lovely. So let's move on then to the Chair's report. I don't have a paper in there. I was just going to give a verbal update, that is. So I think the first, just a couple of things that have been happening that I think it would be helpful for the board and the public to be aware of. So first of all, I think as some of you, many of us were involved with, yesterday we had an absolutely fantastic event called Stepping Forward, which we held as a sort of a consultation with many partners regarding our 3-year plan, the beginning of discussions about our clinical services strategy and many other things. It was a really excellent day. Just in terms of the fact we had not only our own staff, our own clinicians, but there were representatives there from the County Council, the Health and Wellbeing Board, HOSC, the University of Worcester, the Local Enterprise Partnership, Primary Care, the ICB, the Place Executive Committee, the WMAS, Health Watch. Simon Adams was there yesterday. Also the third sector, various organisations, Patient Participation Forum, the Association of Carers and so on. A really rich day, some fantastic conversations, and I think what I certainly, and I think Matthew and all of us that were there would say was, it was the energy, the positivity, the fact that everyone was going to try and come together to think about these problems and come up with ideas. Some really positive day. So my great congratulations to everyone involved in the preparation of that day. That's predominantly Joe Newton and Richard Haynes, but obviously Matthew himself, and of course all their teams behind the scenes who were doing all of the administration. It was well planned. It worked very well. What we have to do now is focus on building on that. The second thing I wanted to just let you know, I received a charming letter from the Bishop of Worcester, which I just wanted to read a little bit out to you, because I think it's at times where I think we're all a little bit anxious and a little bit concerned. It was just something that I thought was lovely to share. Just the bit I'm going to read. He talks about some of the enormous, stressful and relentless tasks that you and your teams face 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, year in, year out. Though I cannot, of course, make these challenges disappear, I want to assure you that the situation is not going unnoticed. I know I speak for many when I express my deep gratitude and admiration for you and for all who work and volunteer in the NHS, including those in chaplaincy. I will not hesitate when opportunity arises to be an advocate for the NHS and the people in it. Please pass the assurance of my prayers and heartfelt thanks to all in your organisation. A lovely thing for the Bishop to send to me, and we will be responding, but I just want to share that with all of you. I thought that was just a lovely thing for him to do. And finally, the only other thing I wanted to mention, as I think some of you will know, we are in the process of recruiting some more non-executive directors. We have 3 vacancies, 2 substantive posts and 1 associate post. We've had a really good response to that. I think the deadline closed on Tuesday, and I believe there were about 20 applications that have been submitted. I certainly spoke to about 16 people, not all of whom have submitted applications, but I was actually genuinely impressed by the calibre of the people and the conversations I was having. So I am very hopeful that we will come up with some really good candidates there. I think that was all I wanted to share. If anyone's got any questions or comments on any of that, I'm happy to expand, but otherwise, if not, I'll hand over to Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. Obviously, I've submitted my report, which I'll take us through a couple of items in a little bit more detail. But also just, I think, on the back of Anita's reference to that kind letter, there is no doubt that the pressure on our teams, our staff, in the organisation and across the system continues, particularly in relation to urgent and emergency care. And I'm sure Paul will be reporting on progress. I think it is fair to say between last board and this board, we have seen a little bit of a breakthrough in relation to our colleagues in community and social care coming together around setting very clear discharge targets for each day from our acute hospital beds. But also we've seen some progress with particularly our colleagues in the Community Trust with their teams avoiding patients being brought to the emergency department. So it's good to see early signs of the ambulance service referring patients to the community urgent response service rather than bringing them into hospital. So it was important to note that response is starting to bear fruit. I also met with the ambulance service chief exec early this week just to make sure that he was clear on the developments that we have coming up, particularly the opening of the first floor of the new urgent emergency department. And also just making sure that we're communicating effectively between organisations at all levels so that we maintain appropriate and professional relationships given the pressure that particularly the ambulance services nationally and emergency department staff are under at the moment. And again, want to take the opportunity, Chair, to pay tribute to our emergency department staff and their leaders for their flexibility and their passion and effort to protect patient safety in challenging circumstances. The other key area that isn't referenced in my report, but I thought it helpful to note for the board, is that cancer waiting times, and there's reference to that in the news today. We have a particular additional focus with working with the National Intensive Support Team. Paul and team were working with them last week. We do, in the private board, need to sign a self-declaration related to our plans to get down to 78 weekers by the end of March, and also to deliver against cancer waiting time targets. That self-declaration request came in quite late. So apologies to board members for the late circulation of the integrated performance report, but we needed to make some amendments to that report in order to align the way we report with the declaration that we'll cover and discuss in part 2, in the private part of the board. So apologies to colleagues for that late circulation. I think on this occasion it was unavoidable. So continuing focus on elective and cancer recovery plans is crucial. Now bringing the board to the board, I think one of the things that I noted last month as a significant risk, and I'm sure you're all aware already, that the RCN ballot results came in yesterday, and of the 51% of our staff that completed the ballot, we have seen a majority of our nurses who are RCN members agreed that they would support strike action. Obviously, our key focus from here onwards is working with our teams and our staff to maintain patient safety in the most appropriate way. And as I think I reported to the board last month, we have our planning well underway. I met with the team, my executive team, this morning to specifically focus on what the next steps are, and I think we're in reasonably good shape as an organisation and well prepared should any industrial action occur within the next month. Of course, we do need to be given 2 weeks' notice. And obviously we're in a position of planning appropriately for any consequence and making sure patient safety is maintained. I think it is worth also noting that the other unions that have balloted staff, their results are not yet in, so we will be watching very closely for those other ballot results as they come through, and therefore the implications for our staff and our services. I don't know whether, Chair, you want me to pause there. Sue's hand's gone up. I wonder if it's a question in relation.
Perfect. Matthew, yes, Sue.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. Obviously, it's absolutely essential that we try and mitigate the effects on our patients. But I'm also mindful of talking to colleagues how incredibly difficult this decision that they have taken is, how incredibly painful it is. We're talking about people who are in debt, who are running up their credit cards. There was a nurse talking very movingly on the news last night. And I think it's important we also mitigate any risk of intimidation or pressure on people who are enacting something that they are frankly weeping about having to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been very much part of our conversations, Sue, about how we appropriately support and continue very close engagement with all of our staff, irrespective of their particular view on industrial action. So that's very, very important to us to maintain open communications, both with our staff side leaders, but also with our staff across the organisation. So thank you for that particular reference. Just moving on very quickly to other items in the report. Building on yesterday's event, we've had a lot of engagement actually with local colleagues from council and from the community trust, and we will continue to build some structure around that with a memorandum understanding that I'm hoping we'll be bringing back to the board that will articulate our relationship and future working progress with the Health and Care Trust, but also with our colleagues at Wye Valley Trust, where we are working on a number of services jointly in order to provide more resilience in some of those services where critical mass of consultants and other staff are particularly under pressure. And finally, just to note, the recruitment process, as referenced last month, is well underway, and we have now dates set aside for interviews and I hope successful selection. So happy to pause there, Chair, and take any questions or observations.
Thank you, Matthew. Any questions or comments? Simon.
Thanks very much, Matthew. I just thought it might be worth noting, obviously, we had the visit from Simon Garrity, Paul Robinson and Brandon Clayton, which went very well to the new UEC. And also in your item, you talk about joint working with the Health and Care Trust, which is moving forward pace, which is great. While we were doing the tour of the new UEC with Councillor Garrity and his colleagues on that day, the first floor, we visited the frailty unit, and he did say, what would it take to get a couple of our social workers based here permanently? And I know we're exploring with the Onward Care team at the Health and Care Trust about having some of their staff based there permanently. So I thought it was worth mentioning here in public board because I know he was very positive about it. And essentially we have an opportunity there to have all three organisations acting as a single team, which really is what the integrated care system is all about. So I'm sure we can get this done. And hopefully in time for when we open, perhaps not in December, but perhaps when the whole thing opens, to have a single team there comprised of three organisations looking people in the eye in that frailty unit and saying that's where they need to go and we'll make it happen.
Absolutely, and colleagues that were at the event yesterday will know that the dominant message from all collective parties from various different groups was that we're failing people. priority in the county, and therefore to be organising ourselves in a different way. And you're right, Simon, in terms of the Onward Care team and the way in which that works and that's constituted is actually under review with the former Director of Nursing from the CCG leading a review of that, and that will conclude, I think, very shortly, and that will, I'm sure, talk to the people that need to be in that team to make it most effective, and I suspect social workers will feature heavily in that, so we can report back on that in due course, Simon, but thanks for raising that.
Thank you. Weka.
Thank you, Chair. Just on recruitment, Matthew, I think these are really crucial posts that we'll be recruiting. I think there's a huge opportunity to bring diversity at the senior executive level, at the VSM level, and I just wonder, in choosing the headhunters to this showing in healthcare, I wonder whether you impressed on them the importance of diversity, whether you looked at their track record on diversity recruitment.
Shall I respond to that one? So yes, to provide you, yes, we did that. We specifically set out that requirement as part of the service specification that we wanted, and we've got a criteria that we scored against those that submitted their quotation to support us with this, and that was one of the heavily weighted criteria that we used. So it was the organisation company that had the best track record of supporting that diversity at executive level that we chose.
And certainly, if I add to that, I've certainly had personally conversations with the recruitment consultants and have heavily reiterated that point as well. So we've yet to see the long list, as it were, but I would certainly, I think Matthew and myself and Tina have been very explicit about the needs in that area. I think, thank you, Matthew, for that report. I don't see any other questions. I just wanted to to build on Sue's and your comments about the industrial action and the RCN result that's come out. To absolutely reiterate what Sue said, we understand that our staff are professional people and they would not have taken this decision easily. It's a really hard thing to do, and it's and I don't know whether it's a positive or a negative that people felt able to do that. It's interesting. If you look around the country, there are some trusts that where the thresholds were not reached, and I don't know if that says something good about their culture or something bad about their culture. I don't know, but there's no question that yes, this is a very unfortunate situation to be in, but we absolutely appreciate how difficult this has been for staff, and we fully respect their rights to have taken that action, and this was it is their right, and there's no question of any kind of punitive action or anything like that from us. We support the right of people to strike when those thresholds are met. So a difficult time for everyone, and we recognise that. Right, thank you very much. I'd like then to move on to the next point, which is the Integrated Performance Report, and I think that's Vicky.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, everyone. This is the Integrated Performance Report for September, month 6 of this financial year. It's been through RTME and through the subcommittees of the board, and it has been approved at TME as an overall assurance level of 4. That remains unchanged. However, you will note that the assurance level around cancer performance is at 3, and that was approved last month. That would be downgraded given the challenges that we've got around the cancer agenda at this moment in time. In terms of headlines which are identified in the executive summary, operational performance features heavily, as you would expect, around elective recovery, urgent and emergency care, and cancer, as I've previously referenced, and I'll leave Paul to dive into the details of that, so I'm sure they will want to be explored in detail. In terms of quality and safety, fractured neck of femur yet again features, even though we have seen some improvements around that, and the infection prevention and control, and we certainly did quite a lot of conversation at QGC around the ICP agenda as well. and then through into workforce, and we've actually seen some improvements in our overall fill rates, which I'm sure Tina will talk to. The finance report is there in total, and I know as per last time, Dean will want to take us through the headlines around that. So I'll leave it at that, if I may, Chair. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So what I suggest, because there is a lot to cover in here, is that we do break it out down to sections. So I wonder if we could take the sort of operational performance piece first. I'll hand over to Paul. We'll take any questions on that bit before we move on to the next section, which I believe is quality and safety. But let's look at operational performance first. Paul, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So if I start off on the elective side, then I'm pleased that, although this is the month 6 report, obviously we're past month 7 now. As the report shows for month 6, there were now 104 breaches, and I can confirm that our position for 7, again, we will be reporting now 104 breaches for October. And in terms of the point, Chair, that you raised earlier about 78-week breaches, if we can just make it clear that what we is the number of breaches that could happen at the end of March, not the number that have happened. And the position has again improved, and that number now stands at 6,252. So we remain on plan at the moment, achieving a 0 position at the end of March. But those figures are always a forward look. Cancer is more concerning, as we have a significant number of patients waiting over 62 days, and that's predominantly in the skin, colorectal to a lesser extent, and prostate pathway. We have now implemented the changes that I reported at the previous board meeting, so that we have a MRI scanner, the Kidderminster, which is now being used predominantly for prostate patients, and that's now been implemented, and that will enable us to have seen patients, initially charge them and scan them within 10 days. Obviously, at the moment that's affecting the front end of the pathway and is therefore reducing the number of patients that will breach in the future, and we're currently working plans to ensure that those patients that have already reached 62 days are seen and treated where appropriate. Similarly, we're allocating in the new community diagnostic unit at Kidderminster additional endoscopy capacity, colonoscopy on the colorectal pathway, and we have now brought in some external subcontracts to increase the activity on the skin pathway. And in the report, we will say that we're expecting to peak in 2 weeks' time, and then by the end of March reduce the number, which is currently 86, down to 330. Down the plans on the elective are there to achieve that 330 by the end of March, and to be a delay of 78 weeks by the end of March. See now why, which is in any of the final of the year that we know. That's the position on elective. Do you want to stop there for questions, or shall I go on to? So you're on mute. So, Chair, you're on mute.
Sorry about that, I was trying to be quiet. I don't see any hands, so Paul, why don't you carry on, and then... oh, no, Simon's nipped in there. Simon.
Hopefully a helping hand. On page 55, Paul, it references the achievement of the 104 week waiters as something in the future. Probably should just record it as something that's happened.
Thank you, Simon. So if there are no questions specifically about that bit on elective, Paul, please continue with the, is it urgent emergency care, the next bit? Thank you.
Obviously our challenge on emergency care relates to both ambulance handovers, but it's also involved, recognise it also relates to congestion in the emergency department and seeking to reduce the amount of funds patients spend in the ED. And we're no longer looking at as time in ED from a decision to admit, we're looking at it from time in ED from presentation. So our kind of combined aims are to reduce the amount of time patients are over 12 hours in ED from time of presentation, and also eliminate the 1 hour ambulance handover breaches. As Matthew reported in his Chief Exec report, we've been involved in a number of discussions with colleagues across the system about a greater focus, and I'm pleased to report a final session yesterday which involved the RCS, the Health and Care Trust and the County Council. Now agreed a very clear set of discharge targets for simple discharges and for discharges pathways, so paying with rehabilitation to community hospitals where appropriate, to nursing home for nurses actually into the Worcester City unit for assessment before decision. We have agreed those targets split between Worcester and the Alex site. We have a performance against those will be monitored, and we have also agreed that there will be an on-site team now, an integrated team from all the 4 organisations which are based on Worcester and will become operational on the 21st of November. With the aim of making sure that those discharge targets are delivered, which will therefore improve flow and give the capacity out of ED and therefore reduce ambulance handover times. Matthew has also asked me to explore the potential for further enhancement of the ambulance care port area. The board agreed that we could allow free space care port area on the ICU corridor, and looking at the options about whether we can provide an alternative which would increase the care port spaces, but not on the corridor. We've explored that yesterday, and now have the potential options available to report back to Matthew by close of play. Feasibility of doing that. In terms of the North Bristol model, just in terms of an update, Christine may want to come in, but we have continued to progress with the North Bristol model, and we are facing challenges with it at the time because we're not achieving the discharge targets, and there are times when we have fully followed in line with the model we agreed with the previous board meeting, and the aim has been to bring in those discharge targets and that integrated team on site at Worcester to enable that to happen. I should also add that Paula, Richard and myself are hosting a session tomorrow with the Department of Health Improvement team around how we have found the North Bristol model, positives and the challenges and risks associated with it. This we're not being in any way picked on. This is the Department of Health team wanting to visit a couple of trusts that have entered this model to see the positives and the challenges and the risks so that they can be back to the Secretary of State next week, I understand.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions or comments on the data? Simon Murphy.
Thanks, Paul. It's just to note the importance of the 4 organisations forming a single team on the Worcester site to manage this. It can't be understated how important that is in a development, and well to everybody who's negotiated that. And we look forward to seeing progress reports on how it's working. But to physically have people together is just again another example of how I think the integrated care system approach should be working. And well done for sorting that.
It's been a really positive development. We've all had to we've all had to show some flexibility to make this happen, but it is really good that that will now take place. If I could also just pick up on the points Simon made earlier, Dave Raven and his team, working with Christine Paul and myself, are also looking to create a frailty assessment element in the new NEC on the first floor of Aikenbury. And whilst I don't want to say something that we won't be able to deliver, I can confirm at the moment we've had a session with the contractors for the UEC development on Tuesday, along with colleagues from the regional and national estates team, and we're still on plan for that unit to be handed over to us on the 9th of December, and that we would occupy the acute medical unit component on Sunday, the 11th of December, and we will finish the NEC in its existing location on the evening of Sunday, the 11th of November, and it will reopen in facility on the 12th of November. So that remains on plan. There are still some things that we need to make sure that are sorted, but as at Tuesday, the opening of the facility on the 11th of November is on plan.
You mean the 11th of December? You don't mean
the 11th of December, sorry. The 11th of November was my wishful thinking.
Tomorrow would be nice, but no. Okay. All right, thank you. Richard, who's from?
Thanks, Anita. Thanks, Paul, also. So first of all, I think it's really positive news that we see more risk sharing across the system. I think that's very positive. Probably the best thing I've heard so far today. Secondly, I'm assuming, Paul, that this should really help us become more successful in the implementation of the North Bristol model, because that was one of the challenges we've seen. And so I was going to ask you if we maybe can also have a bit of focus in the next finance and performance and board meeting on the effects of what we're doing here. And usually we run like a month behind, but this is such an important topic we've been following for so long that would be my request. The second thing is, so I see some positive developments as we've just discussed in the waiting list, clearly some challenges as well in some areas as we discussed. But I was hoping you would also comment a little bit on the outpatient transformation, where there's also been a review from an ICS point of view, I understand, and I think we're not where we'd like to be. And I'd understand a little bit better why that is the case and what we're doing about
it. If possible, Chair, could I? Vicky is leading the outpatient transformation through. But what I can say is Vicky and myself, with Vicky's team, have done some detailed analysis of outpatient activity across our sites based on the day of the week and whether it's a morning or afternoon session. And that work that Vicky, her team and myself have done together has clearly identified that there is a significant difference in the level of activity that takes place on the day of the week and the timing of that day. And in round terms, a Tuesday morning and afternoon session, we will often see around about 11 to 11,500 patients. As a Friday afternoon session, that drops to around about 5,500 patients. Then we've clearly identified a real opportunity within our existing resource to make better use of the capacity. Although I do have to add the rider that there is an issue about needing to adjust job plans to enable that to take place. So it's an opportunity for us, but it's not an immediate opportunity, because we would need to ensure that we are significantly ramping up. There are about sessions during the week, Friday afternoon being the most obvious. There is a significant difference, reduction in the amount of activity that we put.
So I thank you for that, Paul, and I think so. Richard's first comment was about having a sort of a bit of a deep dive into the impacts of North Bristol, and I think that sounds like a helpful thing to go to F&P. So support that. In terms of outpatients, again, a good question. I think what I'd also like to understand is, I'm sure I've read somewhere that when it comes to our follow-up appointments, we're not doing as much remote as we should be, and that's proved a bit of a challenge. So again, it would be helpful to understand what we're doing about that. Julie, you want to? Oh, sorry, Vicky. Did you want to come in on that point? Would that be easiest if I deal with Vicky?
I don't know what Julie's question relates to, but Paul's absolutely right. So we've got a full outpatient programme work stream set up with various key priorities identified, and we've also held a number of organisational wide events to get a sense of what's truly going on in there. Probably too much to explore here, Chair, but maybe I could suggest perhaps if we could bring something back into private board or a board development session. Also, just to say that Simon is supporting us from a non-executive director perspective when we meet with him. Is it weekly, Simon? It feels probably for you quite heavy. Fortnightly. Yeah, but maybe we could bring something back through into another session, Chair, and give people the details.
That would be very helpful. Thank you very much. Sorry, not Vicky. Julie.
Thank you. I mean, I know I've gone about this a lot, but what's happening with theatre utilisation? There's no change at all, and we're really losing the equivalent of a whole day's theatre activity, because it's always above 20% that we're losing for one variety or another. And really, that's quite a quick win to do that. Late starts and early finishes, 22%. The rest of the graphs, you can't see really any improvement for 18 months, 2 years. So what is happening with theatres, please?
That's you, Paul, isn't it?
Yeah. So we have a theatre group that comprises of the divisional directors and clinical directors that clearly are using the theatre complex. So that's Julian and Joe Marriott from the theatre perspective, but also all the surgical clinical directors and divisional directors. What we have done is we have done a 25-week analysis looking at both theatres and individual consultants at the utilisation of each theatre session. Perhaps I could report in a bit more detail in the private report, but suffice it to say that we have now identified by a consultant that 25-week period. So it's not this didn't happen on a one-off, it's a 25-week timeline analysis. And we agreed at the meeting this Wednesday the actions that will be taken to ensure that that is levelled up. And to be clear, this is not about asking surgeon or anaesthetic colleagues to speed up. It is about ensuring that the lists are fully utilised and fully booked, and that's where the opportunity exists.
Can I just come back on that?
Yeah, I was going to say, if you want to come back.
Well, can we split it out into late starts and early finishes? Because there's often a big difference in that. The early finishes are often to do with inappropriate patients or not enough patients around, but late starts shouldn't be. So can we have that broken down? Vicky, how difficult is that?
We have it, Julie. It's part
You have
of
it?
that analysis.
Yeah, so a bit more detail in that, because early finishes you can sort of sometimes explain, not always, but late starts, no. Thanks.
Thank you, Julie. Colin.
Thanks, Chair. I wanted to share an anecdote which I picked up yesterday in conversation with clinical colleagues, and this may be totally spurious or a one-off, Paul, I understand that, but he made the interesting comment that the lunch break was not synchronised with the individual who cleans up the theatre. So he said after lunch there are 8 or 9 people all ready to go, but they can't because the practical sort of logistics hadn't been completed. And quite often in our conversations around theatre utilisation, our focus is on our clinical colleagues. But I wondered, I just want assurance really that you're looking at all the aspects, all the logistical things that could prevent us being able to maximise theatre utilisation.
Yes, that is part of the work that has been done, Colin, and perhaps I could provide, as I've said, a bit more explanation in the that report meeting.
Thank you. Sue.
Thanks, Chair. It's just something, going back to something you just mentioned, and maybe you're going to come back to us with it, or we'll take it outside this meeting. But you mentioned the use of the frailty score. Is that at the point of admission? And what's the intended use of scoring at that point?
At the moment, we have a GEMS team, but they operate within the emergency department, and therefore the patients, that analysis and that scoring is done whilst the patient is in ED. Plan is when we move into the first floor of Aikenbury in December, we will create within the AEC a frailty bay, and those patients will be immediately taken out of ED, and the assessment will be done in the AEC rather than the emergency department.
The reason for asking the question is that frailty score is based on baseline by virtue of the fact there's a lot of concern about the use of frailty scores in the acute setting, and then making decisions of condemnation or escalation of treatment based upon that. By definition, if they're in an RED, they've dropped below their baseline, and you should be referencing it to what they're like normally before this acute illness, but that's actually quite difficult to do. It's quite a sophisticated assessment, because you're trying to interrogate someone with an acute illness about what they were like 6 weeks ago. So I just want to flag with you that I see Christy's coming in, so she's probably more up to date than me, but it is there is some concern around the use of frailty scoring in the acute setting. I just wanted to flag that with you.
Thanks, Sue. Christy, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I think we could be kind of conflating frailty scoring and the comprehensive geriatric assessment, which is really what Paul is referring to in managing our older patients more holistically when they come in through our front door.
Yeah, I'm all for that, Christine. You're quite right. I mean, if someone just ticks the box on the frailty, the frailty score picture box, you just tick it in the acute setting. It's not that sophisticated assessment you're referring to. So thank you for that reassurance.
Thank you. I have just one question myself on the urgent emergency care piece. One of the things that if you look back at the data over several months, there does seem to be a slow creeping up of our conversion rate, i.e. the decision to admit. Now, anecdotally, I've been told that that's partly because when departments are under such pressure, it does sort of encourage a little bit of risk aversion, and therefore perhaps that leads to a slightly greater number of patients admitted. But I wondered whether, and I guess this is a question for Christine or Paul, I wondered if you could comment on that. Is that something that you're concerned about? Is it something that we are taking any action about? If you could give us some assurance on that, please. Thank you.
I think it's very difficult to untie the risk aversion question from the acuity of the patients who are coming to the front door. So our ambulance conveyance to admission ratio is higher on the Worcester site, and that is more related to the clinical specialties of the patients arriving. So the major trauma, the vascular, the complex medical, and so on. We think. I guess the only evidence that I can put forward in terms of risk aversion or otherwise is that our readmission rate following discharge is benchmarked pretty much the same as most other acute organisations. So if we were admitting patients who didn't need to be admitted, then our readmission rate would be very low.
Yeah, thank you, that's helpful. Paul, did you want to come in on that point?
If I could, Chair, just in terms of, yes, there has been a slight increase, but if I could just point out that between April 20 and March 21, over those 12 months, our conversion rate ranged between, this is for the Trust, between 29% and 34%. For the year April 21 to March 22, that range was between 25% and 29%. And for the first 6 months of this year, the range has been between 22% and 25%. So if you compare that over the 3-year period, our conversion rate is actually reducing. So this year, as I said, it's ranged between 22 and 25%. But when we've compared ourselves to the rest of the region, we're in the lower range of the conversion rate.
That's helpful because obviously in the data in the table implies that in September it was 29%, which is why it looked like it was going up. But if you've got the data over a period of time, that's helpful. Julie, you wanted to come in.
Yes, on that point. Have we considered doing a joint audit? Now we're working together with the other organisations, a joint audit of, and I fully accept that the patients coming through need care, but whether actually an acute A&E and an acute bed is the most appropriate, or could we find, what would be the ideal care for this patient? Make sure that the services configured in our region are really what the patients need, and it's not that we're the only option sometimes.
Christine? Or was that Paul? Sorry, Paul was there first, I think. Paul.
Sorry, mine was an old hand, apologies.
Oh, okay, sorry, Christine. Thank you. You're on mute, Christine.
Oh, it has to happen once, doesn't it? So with system partners, we have done a point prevalence audit that has looked at all the patients that are in bedded care or receiving community supported care across the whole of the ICS, to look at whether they are in the most appropriate care setting for their needs. We've had some initial analysis of the data, and we're meeting tomorrow to discuss it in a bit more detail, but there has been some very interesting information come out of that audit, which was based on a clinical assessment by an experienced clinician of whether those patients were in the right care setting at that time.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. And yes, we're looking forward to seeing the results of that, and indeed our own internal audit that we've conducted as well. Lovely. Thank you very much. Obviously, that's the operation performance is something that's very much top of all of our minds. But let's move on to quality and safety. Is that you, Paula?
Yeah, it'd be joint between myself and Christine, and I just want to pick up on, obviously we did have a very long discussion at Quality Governance around infection prevention. So I thought everybody knows that we've absolutely breached the target at the moment of CDID. The issue we got early on in the year was the 955 ribotide, and we haven't had one of those since July. So that's showing that the transmission has dropped off. So that's positive. But I thought I'd just give a quick update as where we are with COVID and flu, etc., so that everybody knows from an up-to-date perspective where we're at. So at Worcester, we've still got 4 wards in an active outbreak from COVID. and we're in the monitoring stage at Worcester for 8 areas of COVID. At the Alex, there's 1 ward in active outbreak of COVID and two wards in the monitoring phase. We've got no flu outbreaks, but we do have patients with flu, and we've had no norovirus, touch wood, she says. And we've got an increased period of C. diff in 3 wards here at Worcester, and 1 ward with a monitoring phase of CPE. So that's the update. Now, obviously, we're moving into the realms of winter, so we will have the winter vomiting bug at some point. I did think we'd get it as soon as the children went back from half term, but touch wood again, we haven't seen that. So I just wanted to give an update there to where we're at. And then obviously we talked about cleaning, we talked about the NHSE eye visit and the Professor Wilcox visit, and antimicrobial stewardship. So all of that is still working through an action plan about what we're going to try and do to prevent any further C. diff cases. But what is also being muted is that there is still high incidence in the community, not the community hospitals, in the community itself of C. diff. And that goes back to, I think, pandemic stages of prescribing antibiotics for dentistry. But what we need to do internally is when we get hospital acquired is take that root cause analysis further back to ask the question of whether they've been administered antibiotics at a later stage and they've been to the dentist or they've been abroad or whatever, to look if there's a higher incidence there, and then we can link that back to the community. I'll pause there for questions.
Right, thank you, Paula. Any questions on infection prevention and control? I don't see any hands. Thank you very much for the update. People and culture. Peter, was there anything you just wanted to draw to our attention?
Just some headlines, if I may, please, Chair. So just to say that due to the extra resource that we put into the central recruitment teams, we have made progress against our time to hire, which has seen the benefit of the reduction in the vacancy rates. And we've now met our revised workforce plan, so we've caught up. However, that is to make a standstill on our current vacancy rates, so we are looking to see how we can put an additional recruitment activity to further reduce that. We've also seen some green shoots around our retention, so the last couple of months we've seen a slight dip in our staff turnover rate, but it's too early to say whether that's consistent theme yet, but that remains our focus. We are still driving through our staff offer at every opportunity in the organisation. So that's the main highlights.
Thank you, Tina. And I apologise, Christine, I meant to come to you on IPC, but I forgot. Sorry, Christine, over to you.
I just wanted to let the board know about the actions that we're taking in respect of the fractured neck of femur pathway, which is highlighted on the integrated performance report. So next Friday, we have an away day with the whole of the trauma and orthopaedic team, the wider multidisciplinary team. We have done some initial process mapping of the trauma pathways and identified a number of wastes and opportunities for improvement. We will be starting the day with a patient story to demonstrate the impact on patients of waiting and delays in treatment of fractured neck of femur, and we will be having some facilitated breakout groups to address the different areas in the pathway where we feel that we can make improvements. We know that our patients with fractured neck of femur are less fit when they're going to surgery, because often having waited for a long time at home before an ambulance arrives, they are delayed on the back of the ambulance and they're delayed in their journey through the emergency department. So I think there's plenty of opportunities for us to make improvements with that pathway.
Thank you, Christine. That does sound like a very good initiative, so that's great. Right, I don't see any of your hands, so let me move on to the financial position. Neil?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is the 6-month position. So the in-month position for month 6 was break-even to plan, which leads to a cumulative adverse variance of 0.2 million. So no change from month 5, which is positive. The large variance that you can see in month in respect of income and employee expenses relates to backdated pay award. We continue to experience high spend on temporary staffing in line with August levels. The PEP overperformance in the month is due to we started recording non-recurrent benefits just to make sure that we're comparable with our colleagues across the system. So you can see an uptick in our PEP, but it's the similar challenge in terms of PEP overall. So our PEP now stands at 3.7 year to date versus 6.9 plan. And that's being supported by slippage on developments and non-recurrent underspends on our business cases. In terms of the forecast, we'd undertaken a deep dive forecast with divisions in month for the month 6 position, and that came back with a position of a 25 million deficit. So there's a potential risk of around 5 million to achievement of our plan. There are some key assumptions within that we don't get any money for the PDU-AMU from our commissioners, and in particular we spend the money associated with the elected recovery fund in totality. We are working through some mitigations to offset that for year end, and we're bringing those back to the Finance Committee next month. Should I pause there and move on to Capital, Chair?
Yes, let's pause there. Any questions or comments from anyone? Waqar.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Neil, just on the increase in expenditure, if I could just ask just questions on that really. I mean, the explanation is that it's due to the pay award and undelivered PEP. And I just wonder whether those were the only explanations for the increase in expenditure, and also, in your view, how do you think we can get the PEP to get back on track with?
Thanks, Waqar. I mean, there's many variances, but those are the main reasons that I've outlined there, Waqar. In terms of the PEP, from the perspective of between now and the end of the financial year, given the time that's available, we're in month 7. Realistically, it's about non-recurrent benefits and pushing those schemes that are already in place harder and preparing for next financial year, particularly in terms of changing our approach. And we've got a paper coming to TME, a joint paper between myself and Joe, hopefully getting to TME next week in the Finance Performance Committee later in the month. But realistically, it is more of the non-recurrent as we are right now, rather than setting up new programmes of work. We're certainly focusing on looking at the balance sheet and just making sure there's nothing that we can't bring out of the balance sheet at this stage. But again, we'll go through that in finer detail at the Finance and Performance Committee.
Thank you. Richard.
Thanks, Anita, and thanks, Neil. So we spent a lot of time on this in Finance and Performance, clearly. And so the first thing I want to say is I want to really compliment the team, because I think they've done a really thorough exercise in understanding the forecast for the year. I think that gives us a lot more assurance for this year. I think the two bigger concerns that remain out of this, for which there are follow-up actions, is one, the discussion on the PEP, and clearly we're not delivering on the PEP, we're not maturing some of the earlier ideas in the PEP, and I think we're kind of saying, well, we understand how we're going to finish the year, but for next year this needs to be fundamentally different. So that's one of the things that Neil commented. The second thing is the fact that, of course, a lot of the one-offs that help us achieve this year's position is that we postpone money where we're going to spend on business cases, and all those business cases serve the purpose. Yeah. So what is the effect of that on not just this year but coming years, which is really important, which is the other thing that the team is going to look into. So we're kind of managing our P&L for the year quite adequately, but for the future there's quite a bit of work to be done.
Thank you, Richard. Colin.
Thanks, Chair. My question relates really to how we're positioning our projected outturn within the system, because we are going to be north of what we predicted originally, I think. And so how is it sitting? Are they
going to be increasing the pressure on us to try and get back to where we thought we were going to be?
Thank you, Colin. And I would add to that, I think Neil's had to reconnect, but just while I'm waiting, just checking, I also had a question, and this may well have been covered in your discussions in F&P, but clearly we've been assuming the full ERF money, even though we've not been making the activity level. I'm just wondering how confident are we that that's going to continue, because clearly that's going to, if that is withdrawn, that's going to leave a pretty big hole in our finances. Neil, are you back?
Yeah, I do apologise, Chair. This is quite frustrating. I'm
no problem. These things happen. But if you deal with Colin's question first, if you heard it, and then, as I say, if you could also comment on the ERF situation, that I'd be grateful.
If I could comment on the ERF, I only got the back end of Colin, so if you could provide that, that'd be great. In terms of the ERF, we are advised by certainly the ICB that we should continue as assuming that we will get the ERF, and that should come through. We do have a call with the CFO, NHS England CFO, on Friday, tomorrow in fact, so I'm hoping to get some more understanding in that respect of what we should be expecting going forward, but that's been the line that we've been advised to take so far.
Okay, thank you. Colin, would you mind repeating your question for Neil?
Yeah, sure. So Neil, it was about how our projected outturn sits with the system.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Yeah, so from the perspective of our ICB colleagues, in terms of the projected outturn at this stage, there's some significant risk for the ICB around continuing healthcare, but there's no suggestion at this point that we are changing those forecasts, but they are increasingly under pressure in that respect. The other providers within the system, similar to ourselves, are managing pressure at this point.
Thank you, Neil. Neil, I wonder if moving on then to capital and cash, I wonder if you could give us sort of your sort of key points you want us to be aware of. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair, and I'll try and reconnect at the same time, so I'm just conscious my phone is also about to die, so apologies. Best laid plans. In respect of capital, as I reported last time, we are under pressure. We've got a huge capital programme for the year. Year to date, we've spent £8 million and a significant programme left towards the end of the financial year. The biggest challenge we've got is around the urgent emergency care and the funding around the urgent emergency care scheme. And as we've previously discussed, there's been a challenge in respect of how that would be funded. At this point in time, we're looking at an internal solution to that. We discussed this in detail at the Finance Committee, and that does involve us paring back on our own internally generated funds for capital, and which does mean that there's potential challenges around the timing of schemes such as equipment replacement and backlog maintenance. It's not an ideal situation, so we have Matthew's written over to our ICB colleagues outlining those risks to try and get their support and getting some traction and understanding with the region around how they might help us with the timing and flow of some of the funds, particularly around the larger strategic programmes, such that we can hopefully broker some of this challenge that we've got this year into next year and pay some of that challenge over at least 2 years and hopefully more towards 5 years. But as it stands right now, if we were to achieve all of the capital programme this year as outlined, as planned, we could be 12 million short, 13 million short at the end of the financial year. That's an unlikely position to happen in a sense that we will probably look to slip some of those programmes into next year. But that's the challenge that we have at this point is ideally we would like to complete all of those programmes as about equipment replacement, backup maintenance, etc., because they're all important schemes, of course.
Thank you, Neil. And any particular comment on the cash situation?
Cash is healthy at this point, and largely because of where we are on the capital programme and slippage there. It's a high balance, but no, not seeing any challenge around cash at this point, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And I must reiterate Richard's comment. I must compliment you and the team for the finance report. I have to say, I think the way it's structured, it seems very clear. I think it helps give me assurance as well that we understand what's going on, even if we don't necessarily have solutions for everything immediately. So thank you for the work that you and the team are doing on this.
Thank you, Chair. I'll pass that out to the team. Thank you.
That brings us to the end of the IPR. Are we happy? This report is for assurance on a level 4. Are we comfortable with that level of assurance? Yes. Thank you very much. Great. So let's move on then to, and I'm desperately trying to find my page, the committee assurance reports. I think it's is it F&P first? Sorry, if anyone can find the page, that would be really helpful because I'm madly skipping.
121 163.
121.
And it is F&P first. So.
Oh, it's F&P. Perfect.
Well, I don't have a lot to add to the discussions we've had. I think we've highlighted all the important areas in the discussions we had. In relation to the financial position, we talked about some of the concerns. Clearly, the last part of the explanation that Neil gave on capital also is quite concerning. And we've asked to do some specific risk analysis on that and hope to see the results of that in the next financial performance. Other than that, I think we're covered by the discussions.
Thank you. Joe, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, just for the minutes, please, Chair. One of our well-led close is to do with sustainability in the Green Plan. And you'll note that as the board requested, we took an update to finance and performance in terms of where we are and where we propose to go. And you'll see that the recommendations of the board is to note that discussion from the subcommittee. We are planning as well to have a session as part of board developments in the new year around the green agenda, and also to bring a staff story about what they're doing at a future board meeting. So just so that we can note that, please, for minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. And again, apologies. We actually have the Green Plan on the agenda for this morning's public board, but because of the sort of the changes in the IPR and our need to focus on that area, we ended up having to put that item back. But we are, we're very comfortable it's getting full scrutiny at F&P, and therefore it's something that we were comfortable doing. But Matthew and I took that decision given where we were. So apologies. F&P, moving on to QGC. Julie.
There's not a lot to add to what Paula said this morning, but I will say that what she said in terms of the COVID, the C. diff infections, we're still looking for a solution to the bed washing that we lost. But also we looked at the medicines optimisation annual report and basically accepted that a manual system recording it is going to not be recorded, so looking forward to the digital system. Other than that, I think it's as read.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Any questions or comments for Julie? I don't see any hands. People and culture. Is that you still, Julie, or is?
Yeah. I did that as well. I don't think there's a lot to add to the notes there. And Tina did a presentation before about what we're doing around recruitment and retention, which is good. So, as read.
Okay. Again, I don't see any hands. Thank you very much. So we note those reports, or for assurance. So thank you. That's very helpful. Right, let's move on then to the scheme of delegation. That's back to you, Neil, isn't it? We lost Neil again. You're on mute if you are there.
Sorry, Chair, I've had to move offices and I wasn't hearing the sound. Apologies, have I missed a question?
No. I was just we've just moved on to the amendments to the scheme of delegation. So I wondered if you just wanted to say a few words about that.
Oh, sorry, right, I do apologise. Yes, so this has come out of the Rapid Improvements event around recruitment. And there's an opportunity to make some significant improvements around the ATR forms. Forget me, I've just apologies for that. I've forgotten the
authorisation to recruit.
Thank you. Do apologise. Authorisation to recruit. And there's an opportunity, particularly in respect of, there were two requests really, but the first one was around those that were in post. So we've got somebody in post, they've been in post for 6 months, the budget is there, the established workforce is there. Can we go straight out to recruitment? And I think it makes complete sense. Currently they're all going through a panel for approval, and pretty much they all get through because there's a budget there, and these are obviously posts that have been covered recently. So it makes complete sense, I think, to approve that, and it takes about 11 days off that recruitment cycle, which obviously is a significant benefit given where we're around agency. The second one was around trying to do something similar about those that were outside of that criteria, i.e. above budget, and declined that at this point purely on the basis that we've got an audit report coming in the next few weeks in respect of high cost agency staff, which would be covered by that proposal. So at this point I've declined the proposal pending the outcome of that audit report and any issues that we've got around controls. So if the board can approve the former, which is really just on a like-for-like basis, where we've got a budget, where we've got establishment, where somebody's been in post for the last 6 months, and the budget manager can go straight out to recruitment, I think that makes complete sense.
Thank you, Neil. Colin, as audit chair, I know it hasn't come to audit committee because you haven't had an audit assurance in the time, but I believe you've taken, if you like, a chair's action on audit assurance committee. Is that right?
That's right, Anita. Yes, Neil's briefed me pretty thoroughly on this, and I'm perfectly content that it's the right thing. I'm sure if there had been an audit committee who would have approved it. I took the chairman's action. I'm happy to recommend it to the board.
Thank you very much, Colin. Richard.
Well, now that Colin has said it, I cannot say anything else, can I? So first of all, I would want to commend the work behind this, because it's really good work and it's the right approach. So we've used the forward methodology here. It's really a good outcome. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I'd like to just understand what it means when there's budget there, because for me, when, let's say, a division or a specialty, I don't know what level we should look at, but when they're running behind, we should still put more scrutiny on these things. That's my view. So I just want a bit more clarity on what does it mean when the budget is there.
Thank you, Richard. Neil, did you want to comment on that? We lost Neil again. Colin, I don't know, in the conversations you've had with Neil, you can comment while he's not here.
I take absolutely the point, Richard, but I did ask Neil explicitly on how many occasions reference to the panel caused the application not to be proceeded with. So in other words, was it a control that had any practical function? He said in reality most of them went through. And so it was a case of it being a delay which didn't seem to have any control benefit for us. So on that basis, I was happy to say it was a needless process, and let's just do without it.
Thank you, Colin. Yes, no sign of Neil yet. Matthew, you wanted to come in on
that? Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I suspect, Richard, what might be playing on your mind is something that I think we've discussed and rehearsed a little bit, which is how we help our directorates and our corporate divisions to think about restructuring and reviewing their skill mix, and really how that plays into managing the establishment in the most constructive way. And I think what this doesn't do is take away the requirement for us to continue to scrutinise and work with our directorates, both clinically and corporately, to look at how their skill mix is organised and how their establishment is organised, and to make sure that's fit for purpose, obviously from a safer staffing perspective, but also looking at the financial implications of perhaps trying to reduce, where we can headcount or banding and so on. So I think that's going to be something we're going to continue the significant focus on as we through the rest of this year and into next year. because we can't lose sight of that. I don't think this process necessarily challenged that, but we have other processes to challenge that. I hope that's a helpful comment. Exciting, I want to jump on the back.
Yeah, just to follow on from Matthew, that's what we are looking at as part of the value stream as well. So we've already had one event looking at our establishment control policy, and we do, through this form, require people who ask prompt questions about, is it still the right, post that we need to deliver services? So we have built that in. So this is just a small part, like a sort of inch wide, mile deep part of our review of the value stream of the end-to-end process. So that's why, to Neil's point, why we haven't taken forward the second recommendation out of that workshop yet, because we've got still further work to do to make sure, Richard, we're picking up the point that you're making.
Right. Richard, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, just a final point. So I think that's good to hear, for sure. But we discussed earlier in earlier meetings, maybe not in the board per se, but in community meetings. When people deliver what we have agreed they would deliver, we should empower them to do what they need to do. Right? That's the principle, and I'm fully behind that principle. When people are not delivering what we agreed they are delivering, there should be a bit more scrutiny, because it has an effect on, let's say, our overall performance as a trust. And so theoretically, just theoretically, a case here, when a division would be far behind their actual target of achieving a certain bottom line result, would we still allow this to happen for that specific division?
I don't think things on Tina. I don't know if
I can pick that up. So there's still the monthly finance reviews with each of the budget holders, and this will be something that will be scrutinised as part of the monthly PRM's performance review meetings. So I think, to your point, Richard, something that we would review at both of those if we felt there were issues within those areas, either at budget level or at divisional level. But hearing the challenge that you make, we probably need to make sure we've got some further guidance supporting this element, don't we, to make that clearer, I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank you.
Sue?
Thanks, Chair. I spent a very pleasant afternoon in the recruitment centre at King's House, and they're very, very enthusiastic about this. I think, Richard, my perspective would be, certainly being on the receiving end and waiting for jobs to be confirmed, is that what you see, but to make every job be scrutinised in that way is really a sledgehammer to crack a nut. It causes untold widespread pain for actually identifying very little badness. I'm not putting this terribly well, but the extra agency, the frustration, the discontinuity of the services, to actually identify what, as you say, very few of them ever get turned back. I take your point that we have to have scrutiny, but this has long been a sore in the NHS, that everything has to be always checked back with the inevitable delays, disruption, frustration. So I saw this as an entirely good thing, and that was backed up by Tina's excellent team in the recruitment hub. They thought it was marvellous and the right thing to do for our patients ultimately.
Yeah, and thank you, Sue, because obviously you are the NED assigned to the recruitment value stream. Okay, I think that if I summarise, I think I would agree with previous comments that actually it's really great to see this come here. It's really great to see that we're actually trying to make changes to something that could save us a lot of money. And so I think it's a really positive thing. I think, however, Richard's questions and challenges are appropriate, and ones that we do want, would like a little bit of assurance on that there will still be the opportunity to look for efficiency. There will still be the opportunity to reward teams that are getting on and doing things in slightly different ways. However, I think we have had assurance from Tina that those are other parts of the process, and from Sue. So I think I'm comfortable in asking Are we comfortable approving this change to the scheme of delegation in line with the request to board? Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. But very pleased to see this. So let's this be the first of many. We want to see changes happening that we can say that this process is starting to have an impact. So well done. Right, moving on. Staffing reports. We've got nursing and midwifery. So the first one is that Paula.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. So this is a September report that went to October TME, and it's obviously got August data because we're working a month or two behind. Overall level of assurance of 6. Where we've dropped the levels of assurance is in vacancies, and we do benchmark still favourably with the model hospital on registered nurses. We still have an issue, even though Tina's reported that we've decreased our turnover somewhat. We are still seeing HCA vacancy and turnover, and Tina and I are working on the recruitment and retention for those for that particular group of staff, but also what can we do through the winter incentives as well. Maternity leave and sickness are above the trust target but below the model hospital target. For sickness, there's not one for maternity leave. And then I just wanted to, for Appendix 1, the acuity and dependency biannual review for nurse staffing on the wards, which has to come through to board twice a year. This is the May report. This absolutely aligns. I've signed off all of the rosters with regards to the acuity and dependency and the financial alignment with the ledger, and there were no alterations to the rosters whatsoever. As in the establishments, obviously that is reviewed on a day-to-day basis depending on when we special our patients, and also if there's an increase in acuity dependency at that particular time. So I'll stop there for questions.
Thank you, Paula. Any questions or comments on the nursing report? No? Thank you very much. Right, moving on then to midwifery. Justine?
Yeah, thanks. So the midwifery staffing report for September, we recommended an increased assurance level to level 5. That's been quite a long time coming, so we're very pleased to be able to offer that. And this is because although we saw a slight decrease in the percentage of time that we met acuity, that was based on a very busy month, and historically we always have a very busy September, October. We also had a reduction in our red flag reporting, an increase in our fill rate, a decrease in vacancies, and an emerging decrease in our turnover, which is really encouraging. And there were a lot less delays in care reported during this time. Although the sickness did increase very slightly, the overall trend is downwards, and that's really good to see. And our COVID absence was very, very low in the month. So we have now received our final birth rate plus audit, which will come to board next month, and after that we will complete our establishment review around the midwifery workforce and adjust our roster templates accordingly, and that will go through the governance process that's recognised through NWAG. So as I say, that will come to board in November. The kind of headlines there are that we are currently financed for our clinical workforce, so there won't be any requirement to increase that, which is good news, and that's because we've had significant financial support following the publication of the Ockenden report. So I'll pause there and take any questions.
Thank you, Justine. Any questions or comments? I was just about to ask Simon if he wanted to add something.
Just a comment, if I may, and thank you, Justine. It is palpable when you have the correct staffing levels on those maternity visits. It's good to see, and I hope I'm not putting the curse of the commentator on this, but we do seem to be making progress on those appropriate staffing levels, and it's great to see. And as I say, you can notice it when you do the walk around, so keep up the good work, I guess, and fingers crossed we keep people coming in and stop people going out.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. We've got a sign-up recruitment event with our next batch of students next week, So we should have some more then, and we have been awarded the funding to support our international recruitment. So we've been given money to support the recruitment of 6 overseas midwives. Obviously it's not going to happen overnight, but that's future planning and future pipeline for us, so that's really good news as well.
Thank you. Richard, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just also a comment, because we, of course, and this is for both reports really, we see these reports, we discuss them in QGC as well, and it's almost like you get these things for assurance and you think, yeah, that's good, but it's an incredible amount of work that goes into keeping our wards safe. I just wanted to make sure people understand and pass on the comments to the teams.
Absolutely, Richard. Absolutely. So I think absolutely my congratulations and thanks to both Paula and Justine for these reports, and to the teams, of course, behind both of you that are actually doing this work, because Richard's comments are very well made. It's great that we're at level 6, or that we're being asked to approve or getting assurance of level 6 on nursing and level 5 for midwifery. It's not that long ago where we would have been dreaming of being in such a position. So we appreciate how much hard work has gone in to get this to this point. So comfortable that we'll take those as assurance. Thank you very much to both of you and your teams. Right, okay, so last thing on the agenda, PME report. Is that you, Matthew?
Yeah, so thanks, Chair. Just to note, obviously you've got a couple of summary reports from extra Trust Management Executive Committee meetings that we put in place in order to manage the business case approvals due to the complexity of the environment, particularly around capital approvals. Thanks to Joe Wells and Rebecca O'Connor for their support in facilitating those extra meetings, which again, just referencing the earlier point, a huge amount of work goes into it. Really the main thing I wanted just to note is the significant amount of discussion that we continue to have at Trust Management Executive on operational pressures, clinical risk associated with decisions that we've needed to make in relation to increasing the number of patients that our EDs are treating, increasing the number of patients that our wards are accommodating through the full capacity protocol and the push model, and obviously everything else in terms of other papers colleagues will, I'm sure, recognise, which have come through the governance processes. Those are the main points I wanted to make, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Matthew. Level 5 assurance. Any questions or comments? Colin.
Not related to the report itself, Matthew, but I was able to attend the session yesterday morning, and at the end of the session you summarised very, very well, I think, the themes that were coming out. And I'm interested to know really how, through TME, you're going to report back and what sort of long-term projects or initiatives you're going to take to sustain some of that stuff. A lot of it was about communication with our partners, but there were some other interesting things as well. So really, how are you going to follow that up?
Yeah, thanks, Colin. Well, we obviously, at the end of the day, reference some of the next steps that we need to take in drawing the key headlines together from the morning and the afternoon. As you say, lots of really, not lots of common themes, really quite a small number of common themes actually from the whole day. So I'm going to task Jo and colleagues. Jo's got her hand up already. I'm sure she's going to give me assurance she's already on it. In trying to bring some of those to bear in the work that we're already doing, both internally and across the system. Because you're absolutely right. There was some common themes that I think we'd all recognise. Jo, did you want to add to that?
Yes, thank you, Colin. I think when we've talked about this before, the purpose of yesterday was very much to both do some reset in terms of some of those relationships, but also to come out with some definable actions and an action plan. So in terms of some of the specifics, particularly in the afternoon, all those actions are being captured and will be reflected back as part of a future report. As an exec, obviously we haven't had a chance yet to reflect on the breadth of some of the learnings that came out of the day, which we will be doing over the next couple of weeks. And the board development session I think is scheduled before Christmas. We want to bring back some of the learnings from the work that Anne Baines has done in terms of thinking about actually what our role is working into the system. So we want us to bring all those strands together. So there'll be an opportunity there, I think, to reflect on some of the points that came out, where we want to take it, and specific actions to follow. And I'm also having discussions tomorrow with my Director of Strategy colleagues to reflect from their perspective about some of that collaborative work. There's several strands to it, but it is part of that ongoing dialogue. Sorry, I've got pharyngitis, that's why I'm sounding a bit wobbly.
Oh dear, not good. All right, thank you, Jo. And yes, obviously it only happened yesterday, but we very much look forward to seeing how the executive team are going to move that forward. Right, if there are no other questions or comments on the TME report, that brings us to the end of our formal business. We have no other business, as it were. Before I close, Simon Adams, who actually has asked a couple of questions during the meeting, but I wondered if you had, Simon, if you're still on, if you had any particular comments or questions to finish.
He's gone now.
Right, perfect. Well, that's all right. Well, that solves that problem. But at least we know he was paying attention, so he was asking questions during. So that's great. Okay then. Richard, you wanted to say something.
I might have preempted you, Chair, but worth.
I was about to talk about next week. Absolutely.
I'll go quiet again. Thank you.
No. Well, I'm glad you pointed, but I had actually got it on my list. So thank you very much. This brings to an end the public board meeting today. The board will be meeting privately a little bit later on. Just to say that our next public board meeting is on the 8th of December. But in the spirit of getting back to a sort of a hybrid model, we will be running that one as a face-to-face meeting. My intention is that we will 4 times a year be meeting face-to-face, and the remainder of meetings will be carry on Teams. So sort of March, June, September, December is when we'd like to get together. So our meeting on the 8th of December will, I'm afraid, not be streamed on this occasion on YouTube. I apologise to our mega fans who are going to be really upset about that, but hopefully by next year we are looking into how we're going to organise that for going forward, so that our public meetings can also, our face-to-face meetings can also be streamed, and hopefully by the time of the next one in March we will have a workable solution for that. But we are meeting on the 8th of December. It will be face-to-face at Worcester. And as always, the public is very welcome to attend if they're able to do so. Thank you very much for your time. We're even on time, so that's all good. Thank you very much, and we'll speak soon. Have a good day. Bye-bye.